Welcome back. Gonna play some music from Liberio Conti. Okay. So, we are going to talk about the area of compression where things are colliding, pushing up here in the Cenozoic. Last video, we talked about this map. So I've been looking around, and maybe it's worth pulling this up. Downloads. I watched some lectures, and I came across this, or maybe a good one here, maybe. So we got most of these faults drawn on this map, but we don't have any faults in here. So I came across that there is a fault line here and here. So if I can find the image specifically, that would be good. Maybe this one. So we got the Montague Strait Fault, Montague Bay Fault, and the Rude River Fault. So Montague Strait Fault starts above this strait island and goes up along these islands and then across. So between this strait island and these islands, underneath this, so up this way, across, and then over into this area where the Rude River Fault goes above this island, out of here, above it, and then across to around here somewhere. And there's some other faults, but so out of here, above it, and then across into here. Okay, so that's just some additional details of note. This is apparently very recent depositions, uplift, exhumation in the last 5 million years or so, maybe 15 million depending on which area. I think it goes east to west younging, so like the youngest stuff is to the west. So I was looking around yesterday. Like, if you've seen my Damodar Coon videos, I've looked around the Himalayas. Around Damodar Coon. I started at Damodar here and kind of traced the current flows that I interpreted to be present. So, for instance, here there's this resistance between the two sides where they bend away from each other. So there's, in my interpretation, at one point during the global flood when the earth was expanding and water was participating in the process, a current flowed up this way, but it ran into another current that was flowing this way, and they resisted one another, leading to these branch off characteristics. And then we kind of looked all throughout this area, throughout the Damodar Coon videos, up into here, somewhat, and other places probably, Mount Kailash. But I thought I would try to do the same here. I don't know if I should draw it as we go. So I started at Denali. Denali is here. Here's Mount Denali, which is a higher relief than Mount Everest, but it's not as tall as Mount Everest. It is the highest peak in North America. And my interpretation, as we can see here, well, not in this one, but my interpretation is that a current is flowing physically in the flood this way through this path up here around. Maybe I should bring up my Twitter post. other stuff I was looking at. This one. So current was going up this way, generally in this boundary, and then went over this way down here. And other currents were involved. The current coming out here, going across and interacting. Probably a current going across here in this area, filling the here with pressure. And I drew this one as going inward, eastward, but actually, as I think about it, I think it's going westward, at least in part. Some of it's going north. So I looked around. Here is this stretch, this gap that really has like straight boundaries. Kind of like if we look over at the Rocky Mountain Trench, how it has straight boundaries along the two sides, generally speaking. So there's a current flow path through there. Very similarly, there's a apparent current flow path through here. And hopefully I can capture some of the things I was looking at yesterday. And that's kind of what I thought I'd record on. So the idea is there's a current flow generally going into here, into this location from the south. From the currents involved in Baja, BC, accretion, the Yakutat terrain is over here, which is getting compressed up and apparently creating a counterclockwise rotation in this area, which is worth pointing out, like around this, if we look up this way, around and generally across here, like there's like a half a circle that maybe has a overall boundary down to about where the here is, where the Aleutian Trench. So I was thinking maybe, and if we look like there's a straight line here. So I was doing stuff like this yesterday, like trying to find if I just hug this straight line and continue it though. So that's pretty much where that straight line is, down here at this boundary. If we come up here, interestingly, that's right to the west of this island, and generally to the east of this island, and a little bit overlapping here, but if we give it some leeway, it looks like it generally goes through there, and then it looks like there's a relationship over here. So my thought was, like, because we're finding that there's a younging generally as we approach the coastline of this material here, based on this video, which maybe I can find the image, maybe this one. Maybe this one? Nope. Let's see. Where might it be? Let's just scroll through. This is Kelly Ferguson's thesis presentation from 2013, I believe. Who was studying these islands, but relating them to the general areas of deposition 69, deposition 65 to 55 in this area, 45 to 37 in this area, like the whole width, generally speaking, is like a band, and then 35 approximately in this area. And then here's a place of an earthquake that happened, or fault something to do with the faults there and faults over here. So over on this side and this side. Okay. I don't want to get into too many details because I want to actually analyze this. Just to give a general idea, I'm thinking current flow makes its way generally from over here, that is flowing in part along the boundary as well as up and in, is like a focal point where current going up and in and across this boundary erode the most and push in the most and create this bend that extends up here, even goes up further with that other current, really bending things that were going more east to west but got bent and compressed and then slid along one another. So there's current going west to east here, but then this is pressing up into this area as well as going along this coastline of the continental shelf up and into behind the Yakutat and around into here, somewhere up this way, into here and in through here and in this way, across this way, into here, across further to generally the whole thing. Okay, but I thought I would look at specific mountains now. So if there's a current flow out here holding a pressure, it's filling the space with a pressure that's flowing across here and up this way, up and bending around like here and going back. But then there's another current going across this way that's cutting across here, kind of like laying atop the pressure points and holding a continuous path across that it flows, that then overall is holding pressure over here. So even though there's this pressure down here pushing upward, it's pushing into pressure. So when even though one current's going this way and another is going this way into it, it's held in position. So that leads to basically a compression force. Mind you, this is deep through the layers. It's not just like a surface current, but it's throughout the layers, and including a surface current. But when it collides with the pressure, it leads to compression, is kind of what I'm thinking. So I thought I'd analyze it with that in mind. So it's important to note over here, there's a fault line that goes across this way, according to interpretation at least, that kind of segments this top area and the bottom area. So what I was thinking, based on the branching, because there's branching, it's kind of like a tree. Like a tree starts at a trunk and then fans out into branches. It also fans out into roots, so it does it in both directions. But the grow pattern in both directions is from like a center point. So over here, it's kind of like the trunk of a tree, so it seems like current is flowing upward into this region. And so like as I drew it here, or on the here, as I drew it here, it's just only up here. It's going into this area and going up, but south of there it's going down. Is kind of what I was thinking. Like this boundary stuff here is going upward and fanning out this way, and then finding pathways that it etches through resistance to create this dendritic structure, whereas other current goes down this way and flows into this region, pushes this boundary but also continues through here in more of a like jet stream current through here that we can kind of see his path, like right through here. This boundary that goes up and down over here and down. This boundary and then down. Maybe even joining, because essentially there's a current going this way. East to west. Because of this pressure. Some of it goes west to east over into this area, but most of it, because of the pressure around it, goes out this way. So we've got a current that's going out this way, and a current going out this way, and a current over here going this way. And current just generally going up into here. So I was thinking the mountains at Kodiak are related to a pressure flowing across into them that is colliding with another pressure that's then leading to compression, that's leading to a less erosion of the area, maybe more uplift of the area, whereas other areas like this doesn't have the opposition. It looks like this flows across here, so maybe there's some erosion there, but like this goes up this way. If we just trace this boundary, just looking at the ocean floor over here at the edge of the continental crust, like it actually aligns with there and there. So it's possible, I guess, some of this current is going across and going in and interacting with the cross current, which then leads to these lakes, and like goes up and in that way, and maybe cuts across over here. Okay, so we've got pressures going up through this like tree area, and then an outer pressure. So I thought I'd look at Denali with that in mind and see if there's anything interesting. So the way to find boundaries between currents is like these peaks where there's like a channel like this. So if we follow this one back, it's a main conduit off of this tree all the way here, like it's center growth with side growths to this to the sides, but it through the center is a center path that goes up this way and then bends over here, possibly because of pressures over here flowing across, applying a pressure, even though there's current flowing this way. For sure there's current flowing east to west around the fault line area, but as this current flows up and in, this is how my interpretation is. It's very backwards to modern interpretation, where we're just looking at the current process. So what's happening now is Denali is there, and there's glaciers that are feeding down southward and out here, and leading to this glacier. But the reality is that current flowed up and through this area to create it, and then after the flood happened, after the Earth's expansion process died off and stabilized and equilibrium occurred, then it basically is pushing things uphill, push, and then relief, and it starts to go back down. So we're looking at a like change in the process, where once there was a current that was flowing up this way, stretching the boundary that this overall system was interacting with through dendritic structures. So it was dendritically branching through here, up this way, and then seemingly to around here, if we look like this, like there's a boundary here where maybe it got over somewhat, but it clearly ran into resistance too. Like there's other currents. So if we look over here, another current is coming in this way around and running into this other current at this pressure point, where then it fans out in like two paths to hold the pressure. So it can't go there any further. So it kind of, the dendrite stops growing kind of thing. And if we look back here, that kind of flows over here to this one. And if we look around this general area, there's paths that lead kind of parallel into this region, like all the way across. So I was thinking there's a current flow generally across here and above it. And above it doesn't really have these paths in it, like it stops around here where they're not visible. So this current was not allowing that to happen, but this current in this space there was less pressure because this one physically went past it, went up and around kind of thing. I exaggerated that, but so this area has less pressure, but it still has pressure. And if we look over here at this inlet, coming in through here, not through the Mackenzie River Basin here, but an offshoot. So current was flowing this way and then went down along what would form the interior plains of North America. But some of it went through over here and formed a boundary that reached over to these mountains that compressed between other currents and this outflow. So it's kind of applying a general pressure across to this region. So my thought was maybe it's actually interacting and like extending current flows through it, helping to apply pressure to this area. So there's pressure. And then if we look at the path specifically, as this path goes over, mind you, there's a current flow going this way. So notice how they bend to the right. Like they're not quite, especially near the mountains. Here. There's some bend that way back to the right. This one. Over here, bend to the right. Over here, bends to the right. But if we look on the opposite side, bends to the left. To the left. This one's to the right, but to the left. This one looks like it does both. It goes off to the left. Instead of going this way, it abruptly goes this way. Like right here. It's going right, abruptly goes left. Going right, abruptly goes left. And then offshoot left, left. So somewhere around the Denali Fault is a current flow that's pushing physically the interaction of current that's cutting across here to suddenly and abruptly join it, going left and get across at a later point that's stagnated. Staggered, not stagnated, staggered from where it enters rather than just going in a straight path. So we've got some stuff like that going on. Here's Denali again. Looks like current goes up and in and to the right and up and in to the left, and those interact at a boundary, forming a boundary. And branches in, branches in, branches in, branches up, branches up, branches up. But it's running into resistance, so it's compressing material. Branches off over here. And then as we go back, it's got, interestingly, like 90-degree perpendicular offshoots. Looks almost like a plant. Like a bamboo. Like 90-degree offshoots. Again, though, running into resistance. And just etching channel flowing in, branching off, like a smaller fractal system, flowing in, branching off, all running into resistance. So there must be resistance over here, right? So if we go over here, there's an inflow, one of these other dendrites. Even though this is down the center, there's a pretty bulky area to the right. Like this area to the right is pretty bulky. And that one has some offshoots over here. One of which goes westward into the path leading to Denali. So its currents are branching off and applying a westward pressure into this other current that are then interacting, and between them uplifting materials, compacting materials, and basically compressing, keeping the mountains formed and forming them and not eroding them, where over here, like, it's eroded a path through what's probably more of like a uniformly distributed layer, like forming mountains, etching them into it. It's kind of interesting looking here. Like there's paths that sort of fan off from this point, but that goes back this way, and then another one going this way that goes over here. So this one and this one are flowing into each other, and then there's compression, like a belt of compression generally between them, and then it flows up this way, compression again. So there's pressures on both sides, again preventing a current. Like if there wasn't something here, this current could have continued across and kept going, but because there's other pressures involved, it stops it there and is stopped over here on the opposing side because of that pressure, leading to ultimately the nuances of the structures. Current goes up here, interacts with the pressure there. Some of these are probably interacting, like this is probably flowing over top, like ramping this way a little bit more than the flow is going this way over top this, just based on how steep that is. Where this looks a little more like it might be like sloped less. So there might have been some exchange in some locations. And then this runs into this, so if we follow that one back, that one also feeds back to one of these main conduits, which then branches to the side at a 90-degree angle. Interestingly, where it itself bends. Like it bends, branches off, and then goes that way too, though. So it's not straight here. It actually has like a little slight bend in the path. Branches off there, fills that area, fills some other areas that it can, branches off, applies pressure, but whereas over here there's current flowing in, applying pressure, branching off into this thumb and fingers type of thing that frequently happens in like a shape like that. Branches off this way, goes over here, and then runs up into Denali pretty much. Where all these currents, this one here, goes around, branches off, applies pressure. All these currents are involved in the uplift of Denali, and just all of it in general, but especially Denali being the largest of them. This one over here is not much smaller though. I forget what it's called, but it's one of the tallest mountains in North America as well. So it's not like insubstantial, that's for sure. But there's inflows here as well. Here's one, here's one, here's one, that are all applying a southward pressure, and even looks like they're generally creating like an arc shape here to the boundary. Where over here there's a main conduit, it looks like this one, like over here though, that almost immediately just goes right to where this mountain is. It's probably not as energetic off to the side here. This one's much narrower. Like there's a bulk one center current one, and then a smaller one that's in terms of like the area across here versus across here versus here. Like this is a down the middle. It's just kind of like two gears probably, where this is flowing up and back and up and back and up and back, and just like over time creating exit points to fill the pressure with, whereas over here it's doing the opposite, like a different rotation, where between them is like a encouragement of current going this way that then reaches Denali, leading to a higher peak. And then going over here, around here, running into this cross current, and just kind of going around it here, seemingly, although maybe feeding back this way too. So I was looking kind of all over the place here on different scales. Like we can zoom in. Let me see if I can find it. I believe, was it on this one? No. Where was I looking? It was an incredible structure. Where was it? I think it was up in here somewhere. Crap. I don't remember where this structure was. It was like, whoa. That is so revealing. I feel like it was amongst the islands, but they don't have nearly as much snow as what I'm envisioning maybe is in here. Here it is. I found it. Okay. Right here. Channel. Notice all the like parallel paths cut through this, but a channel that if we follow down here kind of has like a flame shape to it, like a flame shape. Notice there it is. Here's the peak, I believe. Yeah. For some reason the color, here we go. One, just for comparison, 1123 meters, 1400, 1300, 12, 15. So this area is lower in here than over here and over here. That then create a channel that go all the way back here where this flame is, so 500, 7, 800, 500, 900, 1,000. So there's a channel that's got several erosion paths that kind of wrap around too. It looks like this one's not, this is wrapping around. It's not parallel with this, but they're generally pointing at this point. So there's a current seemingly that flowed into this area through here and then to this point. So if we follow this point, just out of curiosity, if we go like this, here's the point. So if we start somewhere like back here, like on the center-ish here, to the point. Not sure if that's the best centering, but there's the point. So if we just extend it, extend this point. I'm not sure if I'm over the point anymore. Let's see. A little off. Also notice the way this is, it's almost pixelated. Even though it's arcing, it's doing it in like a pixelated way where it's like one down, one over, one down, one over, one down, one over. incredible. So I'm a little off there. Maybe I can just adjust this one instead. Even though, 'cause that kind of goes over that. That might be good. I was thinking it contributed to something, like the boundary-wise of these islands. And like flowed over into this area though, and kept going in that current path down here. If we look at here, like it's very straight. It's got an inlet, kind of similar shape. Suggestive it's like had a flow going in here, etching out that flame-like shape. Cutting across even, probably. But going around as well. And just notice even here, that flame-like shape. Which kind of mirrors over here, like it, the two sides. And then if we consider that fault line that we saw, that was here. So like up here, it has two sides too, kind of. Like it comes in here, and then swirls and cuts through, and swirls, cuts through, but then starts to erode back behind. Like imagine a current cutting in, like instead of this, it's cutting in like here, getting in, and then opening up an area on both sides of where it's getting in with eddies, but then it starts to cut paths out, and then behind it, it starts to erode the path back so that it's more and more like this. And over time, it expands to like another tier that then it does that area, and maybe even like this area behind it, where over here it flows more out this way freely, but over here it still creates like a lobe similar to these, but larger and tiered. Okay, what else? There's so many things. This path here generally goes up to the boundary here where the Yakutat terrain is accreted. So like the Chugach St. Elias Fault that then wraps around. But like it doesn't start there per se, it really starts back here and continues through along this way by current flow. Imagine there's current flowing and it runs into resistance of some structure like this that is being in place because the Yakutat terrain is being moved in the current and being accreted. Then this current along the very boundary, some of it would bend, but some of it would go straight, like get over because of pressures to the side. If there's enough pressure out to the west of here, pushing it, the current into the, compressing it into the continent, then it's gonna go over this hill in part and continue straight, but then it's gonna etch into the terrain there, etches in through here, goes straight up through here as well, seemingly to here at least. It's hard to say with this amount of snow and glaciers and ice and the different colors as I zoom in, like what exactly is going on. This also has that triangular shape, like over here, like it was having current go up in there for some reason. Maybe from compression, like it was going around here. But some of it went up and in here and created that area that then filled like a wedge, so that current would also branch off this way easier with a wedge between it, holding pressure against it. And then this current branching off this way, though, began to apply a counter pressure into that wedge. So even though current was flowing this way, branching off this way, the pressure from the opposing side led to some outlet going this way and leading to this area, flowing out this way. Then over here, so another thing, like, that was we talked about the north side here, but then the south side looks like if we follow along, if I go like this again from this corner, but instead of hugging this structure, if I go to this boundary here, I believe that's what I did. Might not be the same starting point. It does generally show an area that this all is within. In this corner. But something, if I go through here, through this general path, over here, I forget what this is, let me see. It's something of relevance. Something of relevance. The western Alaska range. I believe there's something specific there, like a really tall mountain, so like this block right here seems to have some relationship to current that generally gets through here. So my interpretation is that current in this area starts to find ways out, and one of the ways it goes is over here into here, but then it literally goes up and over and across and cuts in. Like there's really nothing like this structure here blocking it, where some counter pressure was that present. Like it actually gets through. It goes uphill, but it gets through and goes over here, and then it is more able to just exhaust out this way. Possibly branching to the two sides here and applying pressure into this current out here to lead to the structures over here, but ultimately finding a way through. And then it gets through over here, where it starts to really find a way through, where it's joining the current that's flowing out this way and like merging with it. So then it starts to really erode the terrain as this like combined forces of water start to flow through here, especially where they merge, like where this fans out, and its area of effect, where it then bends as this one bends and then goes around, so that this current seemingly bends off this way, but it just goes straight across and applies a pressure over here to prevent erosion. Like over here, it could look like this, but it looks more like this. 23,000, 15,000. It's not as elevated over here as it is here. So there's compression here, Also, this current looks like it just cuts over here and like expands out this way dendritically into the counter pressure over here that are interacting with one another. Possibly even exchanging a bit here. Looks like they're actually freely exchanging across that path. Albeit kind of pushing each other up this way. Like this one goes up this way, this one goes up this way, kind of thing. And then maybe flowing out there by their combination. Branching in here, resistance, seemingly connecting there. Some resistance, definitely some crossover. And then if there's a current flowing across this way, into here, and going east to west, generally here, there's another current flowing out where this lake is going across, so that's compressing this area. So it takes this compression to protect it, whereas over here, these mountains are blocking current flow around this area from going over. So when the current flow from the other side goes west, it's more able to erode in this area because of the blocking terrain that prevents the interaction, and instead the pressure applies over here and the current from the other side then interacts over here. So there's mountains here, whereas there's mountains here. Similarly, there's an outlet here, mountains, outlet here, mountains across the path though. So there's an interaction across this stream from the pressures that the current over here is applying across it to help hold this material from being eroded, and instead to lead to mountains, pretty much. And then as we go down, they start to more directly interact where there's a current flow. Somewhere, I don't know where, maybe it even starts up there, but over time starts over here. Hard to say yet without further analysis. But flows this way, and between them there's these happening where they're going in opposite directions. Between them are some mountains, possibly volcanoes. I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of volcanoes here, and some scattered through this area that probably point to things. I haven't really thought about the volcanoes particularly. What else do we have? There's also this. So current flowing up here, similar to how it branches off to two sides and fills the regions. Even interestingly, having this here between this and this is kind of like these mountains between this and this, just fractally so, and at a depth so that it's partly submerged where this is not. Has the arc, bending arc there, bending arc around the top there. Definitely a fractal relationship of sorts. Which is interestingly generally in line, where these are things said to be shifting along one another, where there's a lot of displacement and sliding terrains, so that there is like this generally not slid off. Like it's not like it moved over here. This was a focal point of energy, so it probably didn't move as much, or at least once things got there, they got held there. Also, again, it looks kind of like the center of a circle, semicircle, ammonite type structure that is almost like a gear around which the rest is rotating. Even maybe with spokes. Whatever these protruding things of gears are called. Is that also gear? I don't even know. Here, up this way there. Which is, as we mentioned before, relatively counter to the over here. Relatively, it does look a little off-center. Kind of, this looks a tiny bit off-center. Maybe there's a tendency to be off-center when things are not quite in balance. Because this flow's going up here, this flow's going down here. They're not like in opposition. It's kind of like chakras of shallograms. They're actually not in line. Oh, I need to answer that. Fuck. I guess I'll answer. I'm gonna finish this soon, and then I'll be back later. I just thought I'd kind of share some ideas that were crossing my mind right now. Last night I was looking at this while watching lectures on the area. And I was just looking for these types of relationships. Like this boundary. We just kind of follow here to here to here. Very much at the inlet. Also, this is shifted a little bit. It's almost like a door where the current pushed the door open enough that the door allowed the current to get in, where it was too closed beforehand, like it was down here, and current was trying to get in, and it was just cutting through a little bit, but it just was more so applying pressure because it couldn't get through. So it squeezed the door open enough for current to get in, and then inside is pressure, so it, like, as it fills up with pressure over here, there's pressure pushing back, so it couldn't like swing it open all the way over here. It just opened it a little bit, and then this channel is there where current then went out that way, out across these ways. Here's where one of those earthquake fault line movements were. Very interesting shape here. Like, it's got this arc way back here, that's kind of similar in shape. Like, how does plate tectonics explain things like this? That is an incredible structure. Just a time erosion coincidence plus some generic things like fault line, plate movement, maybe some other details, but pardon me, people that have more technical research in this exact area, they're like, whoa man, there's more to it than that. We also got this other thing like seismic tomography and let me look at the mantle and all these other things, but like when all is said and done, like how did this form is still not answered. Whereas currents can answer this, like a pressure. that pushed in a boundary that had a larger boundary too as it pushed in into like segments even, but had an inlet place that it generally pushed in a pressure. So if we look over here, like it's exact opposite to the most squeeze point of this island. So if current's flowing like around this bend, across, and like down along this bend across, then they're compressing, like there's a width, and as it approaches here, it gets narrower and narrower, which then across from this flat area seemingly would apply a pressure over here to try to open the space up. Like this perhaps was not eroding as easily because of other pressures above it, so it just stayed. Maybe had some type of eddy in this area, like going around here. I feel like I saw some potential eddy locations, or going this way maybe, just based on these. If there's an eddy here, it was probably going this way, whereas it was cutting across past itself over here and pushing this boundary, and then in here pushing this boundary as well as this boundary, and then in here leaving these like extensional segments from the eddy. So if it was going this way, it would cut through those. It wouldn't do that. It would have done it in a different plane pretty much, but it did it here and here, so that would suggest if there was an eddy here, it's flowing this way. Why would there be an eddy there? Maybe current flowing out, running into pressures over here of current flowing generally up. Generally up and into here. So that because it was a more narrow channel, it wasn't sourced down this whole path. Like it kind of branches off there. It's like a branch off extensional path, kind of like the difference in over here and like this one alone, say, for example, or this one, like it's a branch off path that doesn't have as much current going through it. So when it's running into this other current outside, it literally runs into it and can't get through. Whereas down here, it's got like this focused beam forming through this flame structure that's just emitting a jet stream that literally erodes here. We even see it bends upward, which would point to a current flow pushing upward. Over here, it looks like it forms like tooth-like things. So it's definitely getting out there, but it's also probably going around like this. So only some of it is getting out and some of it is going back and cutting across. Let's see. Around this boundary, around here, extending over into there, but around, cross. Generally going over here, where this boundary goes here, this boundary goes here, and then just the swirl leads to another boundary over here where it's like pushing some of the current over here, creating not just one, like here up, little shapes reminiscent of India. Let's just look at some other areas real quick if I can find it. I was thinking over here too, but I'm not sure if I can find it. There was I did a video on a terrain over here, or a structure. Maybe it was here. I can't find it. I'll top of my head. I don't remember what it's called either. But like over in India, down here, there's current flow that goes in along this boundary, pushes this boundary, then goes up, then pushes up, pushes up, pushes up, and staggers. As well as doing the same thing over here, where there's a shallogram feature forms here that then pushes the boundary down and then up, down, up, down, up. And current flow is flowing into resistance until it can't anymore, and then it goes up. But then it flows into more resistance and goes up and just repeats. I think it even does it down here, like here. This is more swirly based currents, but similar thing going on here in that location. So like a clockwise eddy that was generally cutting across here in this gap. Eroding this valley type thing. Which, by the way, I had a thought. If I can find a good image of this structure. So, at Damodar Kund, this ramp, as I call it, the ramp, this structure is pretty much a hill. I mean, sure, it's in the Himalayas, but it's not very tall. Here's Damodar Kund Lakes. Here's the, just for reference. If we go, pardon me, to Damodar Kund. So in all of this, there's a bunch of current flow, squeezing mountains pretty much. And then right here, in this lobe at the nucleus of this chakra and other chakra area around the lobe, that is part of a shallogram structure, is this what I call the ramp, where I've interpreted current went this way and shot literally like a beam all the way over here, where it ran into this location, went over here, went through here, and in part, and went over here, through out here, went down this path, cut across, went over here, and then went up this channel, as well as probably filled in here in part. Major jet stream, like a quasar emission kind of thing going on, that was ramped upward, but that ramp has a U-shape glacial valley, let's say, like this U-shape. Something like this is generally interpreted to be the result of glaciers, but I would argue there's one right here. This thing is small. This is like, it's a half a mile pretty much from the top of the ramp to the base of the ramp, or at least I guess I can add that too. It's 0.6 miles to where the ramp like goes back down. So in order for there to be a U-shaped valley here in modern interpretations, there would have to be a glacier here. When reality is there was a current flow that was swirling in an eddy that also was moving, projecting a beam of current. See my Damodar Kund videos. That etched this U-shaped structure. So the fact that there's U-shape anything, I don't know how definitive it points to glaciers. I know it's kind of like shock quartz. We see shock quartz, we say it's an impact structure. That doesn't mean it's an impact structure. Impact structures are not actually caused by extraterrestrial objects hitting the Earth. They're caused in the Earth's processes, which I've talked about in depth. So see my Earth-shattering impact or something video. Something not too long ago called Earth-shattering something or other for more information on that general topic. Yeah, Earth-shattering impacts, 392. So if we see like a U-shaped valley, it could mean glaciers are at least present and perhaps participating. Perhaps it was already U-shaped largely by current flows. It's hard to say, really, without the specific instance being really considered thoroughly. It's not as simple as like saying shock quartz equals impact. Same thing. U-shaped valley equals glaciers. Not as simple as that. Just a thought I would figured I'd mention. I'm not sure why this branches off this way. I guess as it pinches here, it has a branch off current. It goes up there. Not sure why it wouldn't create more of like this. I guess it was trying to. Like cut this area, but just didn't. Cut this area to a smaller one, but didn't entirely. But then over here, opposite here, is this, which also seems to have an even larger similar structure, at least back here, maybe here, across that way, up that way. Another one here. Looks like this island is at play with how this ended up being here. Wonder if that's the case, if this chunk has any interaction over here. It's less surface. Less of it at the surface, so it's unclear if it would have had as much of an effect. Especially at a wider area where this is more narrowed. Just thinking it's kind of surprising, if you will, that there's an extensional chunk here further out than the rest of this boundary here. It's kind of chakra-like even. And like maybe the chakra-like over there interacting. So maybe this side had a current flow through a sort of chakra, two chakras that were similar to what's happening here, like a narrowing point that then eroded more so around it, but still have that pinch point visible. There's another pinch point thing in that one, I guess. I was thinking about doing, it's hard to decide like what scale zoom in is sufficient. Like I could trace current flows and put it more on a map. Like over here, there's definitely flows in, running into flows from over here. It looks like this flow goes up, but then runs into pressure from this downward current and bends down and joins it. and holds resistance from this. So like this area is an interaction of this current, and this current, and over here in general, I guess. And maybe this current too, I guess. But flows into it that are compressing it. This here is so fascinating. It almost looks like a flower starting to sprout out of a stalk. I don't know the right terminology, sorry. Doesn't have any petals whatsoever. It's like a seed. Denali Fall goes that way, but then I think it's labeled as through this, but it looks like it literally goes around. The current does not go through this because this was forming some other system that ended up blocking the pressure, so it just went around it. Relating to the pressure up here. Kind of like over there. Like a pressure down here that was pushing on this area. That was then feeding across into this area's pressure. That then interacted with a current coming this way, and their pressures caused this current to branch around and around, leading to a structure like this, and how it ended up etching into the terrain. It's another one of interest here that goes across, up and around, and then fans out and goes back, and then has some structures all around it, but generally having a similar nature, where it's got a nucleus here too. This side more eroded than this side looks, although certainly both sides eroded just differently, I guess. Different erosional patterns. This is down, this is over, this is down, this is over. Suggestive it's coming from the bottom side and like up and in there, where this one is going generally across this way as an overall current flow, where this goes up and into it but runs into it and goes around and cuts over here until it can actually like reach over here past this resistance, so it can then flow into this in part. Seemingly looks like it can get through there. Up through here, up through here, through here to the very end. Branching off that way over there, but going in this way. Possibly in through here as well somewhere. It's so hard to see. Like across here. Oh, lordy lord. It's possible to do this for every nuance of the Earth to a point where the entire Earth is mapped by current flows, and then maybe even extrapolate backwards across time to really get the overall picture of how the current flows were interacting at certain times and which ways they were traveling. Like initially they were going this way, and then they saw their current comes along and deflects it, and then it goes around it, like to still go in the same direction somewhat, and another current's involved across all these scales to really on a like breadth of explanatory power in a single thread of current flows to describe how the entire Earth formed, at least from 541 million radiometric dating to essentially the present Holocene, that time period when the flood happened, which didn't take that long, but was rapid because it was the flood. And the Earth expansion process was caused in it because it was highly energetic. And then the oceans formed and the water could retreat, so it's not happening anymore. Ocean beds formed, where prior the continents were together, so all the currents were flowing on the continental crust only, and below the continental crust, within the continental crust, throughout the Earth, but limited to the radius that the continental crust restricted the Earth to being. And then once the crust broke apart like a seed or an egg, it then broke into different pieces of shell that then, instead of releasing some kind of egged creature, it instead just healed between the breakings by forming a new layer that is the new shell, that is the oceanic crust that extends underneath the other layers of continental crust and creates a shell, like an inner shell to the outer shell that is broken of the continental crust, to then seal the Earth so that it is then stable again. Current goes over here, so if current goes this way, and this way, goes over here, down that way. But some of it seems to go over here. Possibly this side, even anything here goes left. And into this region, whereas anything past that feeds to the right. So these current paths going this way are feeding into this area and filling it with pressure, eroding it, probably swirling, some amount of swirl going on that maybe extends up here ish, something of that nature, like an overall swirl that's present, like a whirlpool. And then it has so much pressure over here and up here and underneath it that it has nowhere to drain. There's current flows going this way, underneath this, down across here. So it basically drains out where it can this way. Although this may also be an inlet. I'm not from over here into this region that fills it as well. And this is maybe a main outlet, and over here. I'm not sure if it drains out that way. It might have filled from that angle too. And then drained out across there and here. Although this really looks like there's resistance. Going across and then resistance. Whoa. This image just has straight up fog. Doesn't look like there's a hard boundary. So current probably could have flowed through this whole area and out. Made it out. Whereas over here there's a hard boundary kind of thing. There, maybe not a hard boundary here either. Maybe not here either, I don't know. Like, getting around and going down that way to exit. Although this looks like it goes, because of this path, like if current came out this way, and there's current flowing down generally, it would have probably gone down. But because it's going down, that would suggest it branches off this way and comes in over here and holds pressure, comes in, holds pressure. Whereas over here, it's cutting across, even though it's going also not with the flow. So maybe that's also going in. There's just like higher elevation currents that went across here, out of here. Like upwells that flowed on top, went over the mountains and got on top of the water and went across the surface of the water without really branching down, but applying more pressure on the lower waters, which then tended to erode pass through in the manner that it was flowing rather than the manner that this was flowing out. Things like that could also be mapped, like in terms of the depth of water at certain locations and why, like some nuances of the process that could be captured that are certainly part of it all, like the layers. Like looking at the ocean, there's different depths of ocean current that flow in different directions. Ocean current maps, let's say. This doesn't have different depths. Like for instance here, it's flowing this way, over, and then under, over this way, under, and then back up, and then over, joins this one over, goes over, but at a depth, just swirling around here. I guess with another one higher, at a higher depth, it's going over that joins this way. And then it goes under, around, back up here, over this way, and around. This might show it pretty good. Like this type of thing is happening during the flood, for sure. And so it makes it that much more tricky to pinpoint things. It's pretty easy, relatively, to see some of the surface currents and what they do. Like, obviously a current went through here. If the flood happened and etched the surface of the earth, like obviously a current went through here. But what's not as obvious is if the current went over top it this way. Not saying it did, but just in that kind of mindset, it's much more obvious to see the ones that were flowing on the surface, so at a depth, like more down here than up here kind of thing. Even though these existed. And even deeper ones existed, probably, that were below the surface of the crust. Not just probably, definitely, but below the surface of the crust that were flowing in sometimes the same, sometimes different ways as above. So, as above, so was so below. Also, before I'll just real quick close out. Before I finish, I was just looking around. I thought this was interesting, so if we go over here. Here is this, like, squeezed mountainous area, relatively. And around this way is like almost like a fan boundary. Up to there, opposite to it. I didn't even notice that. This goes all the way up to that corner. Opposite to that corner. But currents flowing in over here from this location, generally speaking, over this way, and turning and going up here, running into resistance from over here, turning and going up here, and in fanning out into this region where it's running into this other current flowing down here, some of which goes around it like this way and goes over here. But this current, as it comes in, seemingly like goes through a bottleneck area, goes over and around and fans out. And what I was thinking, the Bonneville flood is in this area. Maybe there's currents from over here that I'm not really accounting for that I need to, that flow over here, run into resistance of other stuff going on over here, of other currents that are present, including itself, that are filling this area, kind of like in Alaska, like we saw, but flowing over here, applying a counter pressure to this current, so leading to the Bonneville flood, like compressional region where water from both sides are colliding and just building like a mass of water in that location more relative to its surroundings, that then leads to the Bonneville flood. But this area then ends up being protected across this band by like the interactions of the pressures, so there's like a swirl here generally, like an area of occupied pressure. But what I noticed is if we look closely along this boundary and just follow it up this way to here and around, so here all the way over here, this boundary is related to this boundary, is the point, along this path. I know it's kind of subtle. We can see it more here. We can see it a bit there and through there a little bit, and then more so here. So if there's current flowing this way, running into resistance and bending, where then there's pressure this way, so it just bends across and essentially latches in against the resistance here to then form a channel through this way. It seems as if it happened where there's this boundary, which would then point to that the end result of the Sierra batholith structure along the length of eastern California has some relationship to this structure over here, and probably over here. So if we like follow this little dude, like this straight portion, in terms of like maybe even over there. Like generally some area that's not as protected by the Idaho batholith. I know the current paths aren't very present there, but just a region of pressure that current flowing through here can pressure at this like distance over across here and then across this way to here, to then apply a pressure over here that helps like keep the Sierra batholith being as it is, so it physically is related to the process. And then even having like, because this isn't very defined, like over here we see a boundary, but over here it's kind of like a width of pseudo boundary. And if we go through this white generally points at this boundary here. So it's almost like there's one system inside the basin of California, whatever this is called exactly, and then another one over here, maybe another one there even, that I didn't account for, but this one and this one being like two systems in one, but two systems. So like there's one boundary related to whatever led to this structure here in this relatively linear fashion that then points over here. So that's what that is. And then also over here, this other segment having like a general boundary and then flow from over here going into this area where this boundary points at the middle, like this path. At least that's how I drew it. Let's see if it does. I know I previously, let's cheat a little bit, notably, up to there. Probably some relationship to why the Mid-Pacific Mountains happen there, or Mid-Pacific Mountains, what's that called, Middle Mountain? Sutter Butte. I think it's Sutter Butte, Middle Mountain. Sutter Buttes is the geological name. Middle Mountain is like the Indian terminology for it, whichever tribe that holds it to be very sacred. So that thing's got some tendency of relationship there. The green segment being related to over here, where the yellow segment is related over here. There's also a bunch of like paths through like this that are more so on that side. Like if we look over here, there's things going on, but they're not like this. There's nothing really as defined. Like if we zoom out, we still see these structures really well. Here, we're over here, like we see some going through over on this side, but where this side is just more prolific in terms of its strength. And also there's a path layer that's maybe related to that last system for some reason. So I thought there's something going on to this. I'm not saying that's like the totality. So mind you, there's a current flow going up this way. There's pressures out here that are holding the boundary. Also, there's current flow coming from all the way up here along the Rocky Mountain Trench, flowing this way to Vancouver and fanning out to around here, but also going this way. So fanning out this way and this way to create like two lobes, kind of like around the Alaska structure. And then fanning off there, over here, and then over here, over here, over here, and then in here. So it's literally channeling along this region all the way over here, where then it runs into some boundary that it can no longer like extend. So the bathylists over here are not as protected, or maybe not as uplifted, I'm not sure. Maybe they're still there. Like, I think there are bathylists along Baja California's length and in the magnetic anomaly map, but not as protected. Filling in the pressure there, so when this other pressure from over here bends over off of the mountains forming here, it can then apply a pressure into this. It's kind of what I was thinking, as well as up here flowing through. That's really interesting that there's that arc. I never noticed. Maybe if we follow it like arcuically, it generally goes to Flathead. And this one goes to Colorado Plateau Center. Eyeball, eyeball, smile. Smiley smirking his face with a dimpled chin. Whoa. These are kind of across there. That's more so across with like up here. Maybe there's some relationship to the Missoula flood, to the Colorado Plateau across this structure, due to its relative symmetry and differences, but symmetry. Okay, so that was one thing I came across I thought I'd point out, and then I thought this was interesting, just looking over here. So mind you, there's current flow coming in at this point and bending left and right. Left goes up and runs into the boundary of the interior plains where current is flowing down. So runs up into it and interestingly creates a hexagon, generally speaking, with a nucleus type region. So that's what this is. Hexagon running up exactly to the boundary of the interior plains, and then down here. And then interestingly, at the nucleus of this hexagon, spawning off of it, is some other structures that are pseudo-hexagon-like, with a general nucleus around here that this one's a little more subtle, but I think it's there, like around this boundary, wrapping around, and then kind of going down, but like in this general area, like some sort of center point that then has boundaries all the way out here and over across to that nucleus region, and then generally across there, and like something of that nature. It's not as defined overall, but I just thought it was probably there enough to notice. So here's the interior plains extending down to that hexagonal structure. Here's me pointing out, well, if there's a pressure from the interior plains from a current flow from all the way up at the Mackenzie River Basin and entry point that then flows and fans out like this. it didn't let me see the other images. That was weird. Like this, from the Mackenzie River Basin entry point, flows down this way, fans out, and then flows down, applying a pressure. And then there's another current coming up, applying a counter pressure from here, leading to, between them, a hexagon, and then the bending of this path off of that hexagon, and a hard boundary here. Notably, the hexagon's boundary, as well as the other structure I drew, goes to here, over, around, down, over. The hexagon's boundary is generally the boundary of the Rockies. Its top is generally the boundary of the interior plains. Certainly some relationship in like this system exists enough. Then I noticed over here, the current flow is generally coming into this area from up north in the regions we've been talking about, and with regard to Alaska, flowing in here, and then seemingly having a pinch point where this pressure is, where that arc goes up to, and then there's a pinch point, so the current can only flow through this region. But it seems like at the pinch point, it produces on the other side a structure across from the pinch point. Like, I don't think this is inducing this. I would say maybe, though, that there's a pinch point structure over here is reducing the current's capacity to flow through the channel. So it's not as freely flowing. So it ends up reducing the speed, especially along a boundary, maybe. So then, leading to more accumulation of materials there, and then another pinch point and another counter where it was this wide, and then suddenly it goes down to this wide, and where it does that at that bend is this other structure. No accident for sure. I don't know what to make of it exactly, but I just put that in that post. Okay, dudes, I've been kind of just ranting because I didn't know what I would talk about. Hopefully this was pretty informative overall. Kind of jumping all over the place, but for sure I'm gonna get out of here now. It's an hour 42, so no reason to stick around. Peace out. Thanks for hanging out. See you next time.